Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the stars through the big window. The stars looked the same as always, but something was very wrong. 3 months ago, every alien race in the galaxy stopped talking to humans. It was like someone turned off a giant radio, and now there was only silence. His ship was called New Soul, and it was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and strong. Lee Dae-ho had been the captain for 5 years, and he knew his crew. Very well, engineer Park Soo-jin was the best person to fix engines in the whole fleet. She could make old parts work like new ones, and she never gave up when things got broken. Communications. Officer Kim Bo-ra was smart and could speak 12 different alien languages. She was the one who first noticed that the aliens had gone quiet. The mission was supposed to be simple. They were going to map new trade routes between human worlds and alien worlds. Humans were still new to space travel compared to other races. The Volani Empire had been flying between stars for thousands of years. The Crystal people from Nexus Prime were so old that no one knew when they first built spaceships. Even the Koreth were ancient and wise, and they helped younger races learn about space, but now all of them were gone. Lee Dae-ho walked to the communication station where Kim Bo-ra was working. She had dark circles under her eyes because she had not slept much in weeks. She kept trying to contact anyone who would answer, but the radio was always quiet. "Captain, what should we do?" she asked. Her voice was tired, but she still wanted to help. "We have checked every frequency and every communication channel. Nothing is working." The last message from any alien race was exactly 93 days ago. Lee Dae-ho thought about this. The last message had come from a Volani trading post near the edge of their territory. It was just a normal report about cargo shipments. Nothing seemed wrong or dangerous about it. But after that message, there was nothing at all. "We keep going," he said. "We need to find out what happened to them." Engineer Park Soo-jin came up from the engine room. Her hands were dirty from working on the machines, but her eyes were bright. She always got excited when there was a mystery to solve, Captain. "I have been thinking about this," she said. "The aliens did not just stop talking to us, they stopped talking to each other too. I checked all the data we collected. The Volani used to send thousands of messages every day to other Volani worlds. Now there are no messages at all. Same thing with the Crystal people and the Koreth. That made Lee Dae-ho feel cold inside. If the aliens had just decided to ignore humans, that would be bad but understandable. But if they stopped talking to their own people too, then something terrible must have happened, set course for the Volani home system he ordered. The journey took 2 weeks. Even with their fastest engines, space was very big. When they finally arrived at the Volani system, Lee Dae-ho could not believe what he saw. There were 17 planets in the system, and each planet had billions of Volani people living on it. The planets should have been busy with ships flying back and forth. Cities should have been bright with lights and energy, but everything was dark and quiet. Kim Bo-ra ran scan after scan of the planets. Her equipment showed that the cities were still there, the power plants were still working, the lights were still on in the buildings, but there were no life signs at all. No Volani people, no animals, no plants that moved, nothing alive. "This is impossible," she whispered. "How can cities be running with no one there?" Park Soo-jin checked the readings 3 times. She thought her machines were broken, but they were working fine. "The cities are perfect," she said. "Everything looks normal, except there are no people. It is like everyone just disappeared at the same time." Lee Dae-ho ordered his crew to take a shuttle down to the closest planet. They landed in the capital city of the Volani Empire. The city that had once held 50 million people. Walking through the empty streets was the strangest thing Lee Dae-ho had ever done. The buildings were beautiful and tall, made of a blue metal. That the Volani loved vehicles were parked neatly along the roads. Some still had their engines running. Shops had their doors open and lights on. In restaurants, there were meals on tables that looked like they had just been cooked. The food was still warm, but there were no bodies, no signs of fighting, no damage to anything. It was like every single Villani person had just vanished in the middle of what they were doing. Kimbo Ra found a communication center and tried to access the computers. The systems were still working and all the data was there. She found records of normal daily life right up until 93 days ago. Then everything stopped. "Look at this," she called to the others. The last entry in their government records is about a meeting to discuss trade agreements with humans. It was scheduled for the next day, but the meeting never happened. Park Soo-jin was studying the power systems. She found something that made her very worried. "Captain, the power plants are running automatically, but they are set to run for exactly 100 days without anyone watching them. After that, they will shut down. That meant they had only 7 days before the lights went out forever on 17 planets. They searched 6 more cities and found the same thing everywhere. Empty but perfect cities with no sign of what happened to the people. The Villani had just disappeared, leaving everything behind exactly as it was." When they got back to their ship, Lee Dae-ho called a meeting with his crew. "This is not just about the Villani," he said. "We need to check the other alien worlds. If the same thing happened to everyone, then we need to know." They flew to the Crystal People home world of Nexus Prime. The Crystal People were very different from humans or Villani. They were made of living crystal, and they thought in ways that were hard for other races to understand. Their cities looked like giant gems growing out of the ground. Nexus Prime was also empty. The crystal formations that served as homes and buildings were still pulsing with light. The harmony fields that the Crystal People used to communicate were still active, but there were no Crystal People anywhere. The same pattern repeated everywhere they went, the ancient Korath home. Worlds were empty, but their great libraries still had lights on, and their teaching machines were still running. The insect-like Zephyrians had left their hive cities perfectly organized, but completely abandoned. The gas-breathing nebula swimmers had left their floating cities in the clouds of their gas giant, but no one was home. Every single advanced race in the galaxy had disappeared at exactly the same time. 93 days ago. Kimbo Ra sent a full report back to Earth, but it would take weeks for the message to reach home, and weeks more for any reply to come back. They were alone in a galaxy that had suddenly become empty. As they prepared to investigate more systems, their sensors picked up something that made everyone on. The bridge stopped breathing. A massive energy reading was moving through space. It was bigger than anything they had ever seen, and it was heading toward the center of the galaxy. Where Earth was, Captain Park Soo-jin said quietly, her voice shaking, "Think we found what happened to everyone, and I think it is coming for us. Next, Lee." Dae-ho looked at the energy reading on his screen. It was still very far away, but it was moving fast, and it was heading straight for human space, whatever had taken. Every other intelligent race in the galaxy was not finished, yet it still wanted more. He thought about Earth with its 7 billion people who had no idea what was coming for them. He thought about his family and friends who believed they were safe, because humans had made friends with powerful alien races who could protect them. But all those alien friends were gone now, and humanity was alone. "We go back to Earth." He ordered maximum speed. "We have to warn everyone," as the new soul turned toward home. Lee Dae-ho wondered if they would make it in time. He wondered if anything could stop something powerful enough to make entire civilizations disappear without a trace. And he wondered if humanity would be next to vanish from the galaxy, leaving behind empty cities and unanswered questions. The stars that had once seemed friendly now felt cold and dangerous, because somewhere in the darkness between them, something was hunting, and it was very, very hungry. Dr. Yoon Jae-sung had spent 20 years studying alien technology at the Mars Research Station. He was the kind of scientist who got excited about impossible things and never stopped asking questions. when the reports from Captain Lee Dae-ho arrived. On Mars, Dr. Yoon knew immediately that humanity faced something beyond anything they had ever imagined. The energy readings from the new Sol made no sense according to normal physics. The massive signature that was moving through space was not just big. It was doing things that should have been impossible. It was bending space around itself like a giant invisible hand squeezing reality. Dr. Yoon worked for 3 days straight without sleeping. He ran the numbers through every computer on Mars, and each time he got the same terrifying answer. The entity was not just destroying the alien races. It was consuming something far more important than their bodies. It was eating their minds, their thoughts, their very consciousness on Earth. Admiral Choi Min-soo commanded the Solar Defense Fleet from Luna Base. He was a practical man who believed in weapons and shields and things he could see and touch. But when Dr. Yoon sent him the analysis, Admiral Choi felt his confidence crumble, like paper in a fire. The entity revealed itself 3 weeks after Captain Lee sent his warning. It came out of hyperspace near Jupiter, moving slowly, like it had all the time in the universe. The thing was enormous, bigger than Earth's moon, but it was not made of rock or metal. It looked like living darkness that twisted and moved in ways that hurt to watch. Admiral Choi sent his fastest ships to get a closer look. Commander Park Jin-woo led a squadron of 12 fighters equipped with the most powerful sensors humanity had ever built. What they found made experienced pilots cry like children. The entity was not solid. It was made of pure energy, but not the kind that powered ships or cities. This was dark energy that seemed to pull light into itself and make it disappear. The space around the creature bent and warped so badly that navigation computers could not work properly. Pilots reported that looking directly at the thing made them forget their own names for several minutes. Is not destroying them. Dr. Yoon reported to the emergency council meeting on Earth. It is absorbing their minds, their thoughts, everything that makes them who they are. The bodies disappear because without consciousness, they simply stop existing in any real way. The entity began broadcasting on every frequency that humans used. Its voice was horrible because it was not one voice. It was thousands of voices speaking at the same time. The voices of every species it had consumed over millions of years, all speaking together in a chorus of the dead. We are the hunger, the voices said in every language humans had ever heard. We have fed on the bright minds of this galaxy since before your sun was born. Your thoughts will join ours and your dreams will become our food. We are coming, and you cannot stop us. Lieutenant Commander Han. So Young was piloting Earth's fastest scout ship when the broadcast began. She was brave and had flown dangerous missions before, but hearing those voices made her hands shake so badly she could barely control her ship. She tried to get closer to study the entity, but something terrible started happening to her crew. The navigator, Corporal Kim Tae-min, suddenly looked confused. He stared at his instruments, like he had never seen them before. When Han So-young asked him what was wrong, he said he could not remember how to read the displays. The communications officer started forgetting words in the middle of sentences. The engineer forgot how to start. The engines, Han. So-young realized that just being near the entity was enough to make people lose their memories. She ordered an immediate retreat, but it was almost too late. By the time they reached safe distance, half her crew had forgotten their own names and had to relearn how to do their jobs. The reports from the scout mission terrified everyone on Earth. The hunger was not just some alien weapon, it was something that ate consciousness itself. It turned thinking beings into empty shells that simply faded away, because without minds, they had no reason to exist. Dr. Yoon studied the scanner data from Han, So-young's ship, and made a discovery that changed everything. Unlike the alien races, humans showed resistance to the entity's influence. The crew members who were affected recovered their memories after a few hours. Other species that the hunger had consumed never came back. There is something different about human consciousness. Dr. Yoon told the emergency council. Our brains work. Differently than alien brains, we think in chaotic patterns while they think in orderly, logical ways. The entity finds our thoughts harder to digest. Admiral Choi wanted to attack the creature with nuclear weapons, but Dr. Yoon explained that conventional weapons would be useless. The hunger existed partially outside normal space, and physical attacks would pass right through it. The only way to fight it was with the mind. The entity continued moving toward Earth, but it was not in a hurry. It seemed to enjoy the fear it was causing by broadcasting messages about all the civilizations it had consumed. The Villani had tried to fight with their quantum weapons, but their orderly minds were easy to absorb. The Crystal People had attempted to hide in other dimensions, but the hunger followed them there. The ancient Koreth had used their vast knowledge to build defenses, but even their wisdom could not protect them, Commander. Oh Sung-hwan led a desperate mission to study the entity's feeding process. His team used long-range sensors to watch as the hunger approached an abandoned Villani outpost. The moment the dark energy touched the station, something incredible and horrible happened. The outpost did not explode or break apart. Instead, it simply began to fade like a photograph left in the sun. All the technology, all the materials, everything that the Villani had built started to become transparent and then disappeared entirely. It was like the entire station had never existed at all. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that the hunger grew slightly larger after consuming the outpost. It was feeding on the consciousness that had been used to build and design everything. It was eating the thoughts and ideas that had created the station in the first place. Dr. Song-mi-kyung, who had been studying human consciousness for 15 years, made a breakthrough discovery. She found that human brains produced a type of neural activity that was completely unique. In the galaxy, human thoughts were chaotic, unpredictable, and full of contradictions. While other species thought in straight lines, humans thought in spirals and loops and sudden jumps. This chaos might be our salvation, she reported. Human consciousness is like a storm compared to the calm ocean of alien minds. The hunger has been feeding on ordered thoughts for millions of years. Our chaotic thinking might actually hurt it. Captain Lee Dae-ho and the new soul had returned to Earth just as the entity reached the outer edge of the solar system. His crew had seen 17 empty worlds, and they knew what humanity was facing. But they also brought hope in the form of detailed scanner readings that showed the hunger slowing down as it approached human space. The entity is hesitating. Lee Dae-ho reported it is not moving as confidently as before. Something about human thoughts is making it uncertain. The hunger was now close enough that sensitive people on Earth could feel its presence. They reported strange dreams about being watched by something vast and hungry. Children started drawing pictures of darkness that moved and reached for them. Artists found themselves painting scenes of empty cities under black skies. But something else was happening too. People were starting to have dreams about fighting back, about standing together against the darkness. Musicians were composing songs about hope in impossible situations. Writers were creating stories about ordinary people, becoming heroes when everything seemed lost. The human spirit was waking up and preparing for the greatest battle in the history of consciousness. The hunger had consumed every advanced civilization in the galaxy, but it had never faced anything like humanity. Before, it had never tried to eat minds that dreamed impossible dreams, and refused to give up even when defeat was certain. Dr. Yoon worked frantically to understand how human resistance to the entity worked. He discovered that human emotions, especially the irrational ones, seemed to create a kind of psychic static that interfered with the hunger's feeding process. Love, hope, stubborn determination, and the refusal to accept defeat all generated neural patterns that the entity found difficult to process. As the hunger moved past Neptune and headed for the inner solar system, Humanity prepared for a war unlike any that had ever been fought. It would not be a war of ships and weapons. It would be a war of minds and dreams, and the unbreakable human spirit that had carried the species from caves to the stars. The entity broadcast one final message before it began its final approach. "Your thoughts taste different than the others," it said in its chorus of consumed voices. "You will be more challenging to digest, but in the end, you will join us, as all the others have. Your dreams will feed us for eternity." But humanity was ready to prove that some dreams are too strong to be consumed, and some spirits too stubborn to surrender even to. The hunger of the universe itself, the battle for human consciousness, was about to begin. Commander Park Jin-woo had always been the strange one among the officers. His theories about human consciousness being different from alien minds had made other people laugh at him during academy meetings. They called him crazy and said he was making excuses for human failures in logic tests. But now, with the hunger approaching Earth, his wild ideas suddenly became the most important knowledge in the solar system. "Look at how we think," Jin-woo explained to the Emergency Council in Geneva. His voice was excited because finally someone was listening to him. Other species evolved to be efficient and logical. Their minds work like perfect computers that never make mistakes. But humans, we are completely different. We are chaotic. We dream about impossible things. We believe in contradictions at the same time. President Kim Yoo-jin listened carefully. She had been elected because she was good at making hard decisions, but this decision was harder than anything any human leader had ever faced. The survival of the entire species depended on understanding something that no one had ever studied before: the exact nature of human thoughts. Dr. Song Mi-kyung had been working in secret for months on something she called the Awakening Protocol. She had always believed that human consciousness was capable of things that science had not discovered yet. Her laboratory was hidden beneath the Swiss mountains, and only a few people knew what she was doing there. Every human emotion, every wild dream, every crazy idea we have ever had. Song Mi-kyung told the council, "We can turn all of that into a psychic storm that the hunger cannot consume. Our chaotic thoughts can become a weapon." The plan was more dangerous than anything humanity had ever attempted. Every person on Earth would need to link their minds together using quantum neural networks that had never been tested on such a scale. They would have to open their consciousness completely, sharing every thought, fear, hope, and memory. With 7 billion other people, many people will not survive the process, Song Mi-kyung admitted. Her face was serious because she understood what she was asking. The human mind was not designed to handle the thoughts of billions of other people. At once, some minds would break under the pressure, others would be lost forever in the chaos of collective consciousness. But there was no choice. The hunger was now passing Mars and would reach Earth in less than a week. Traditional weapons were useless against something that existed partially outside normal space. The only way to fight an entity that consumed consciousness was with consciousness itself. Captain Lee Dae-ho volunteered to be the first test subject. He had seen the empty worlds and knew what would happen to humanity if they failed. "I have already faced this thing," he said. "I have seen what it does to civilizations. If my mind breaks in the process, at least we will learn something that might save everyone else." The Neural Link Laboratory was a room filled with strange machines that looked like a mixture of alien technology and human engineering. Dr. Song Mi-kyung had spent years studying devices recovered from abandoned alien worlds. She had learned how to build quantum neural transmitters that could connect minds across vast distances. Lee Dae-ho lay down on the connection table while technicians attached neural interface cables to his head. The machines around him hummed with power as they prepared to link his consciousness with volunteers from around the world. The test would connect him with only 1,000 people, but even that was dangerous as the system activated. Lee Dae-ho felt his mind explode outward like a dam bursting. He could suddenly feel the thoughts of 1,000 other humans at the same time. A teacher in Tokyo was thinking about her students. A farmer in Brazil was worried about his crops. A child in Nigeria was dreaming about flying to the stars, but it was not just their current thoughts. Lee Dae-ho could feel their memories, their fears, their hopes, their love for other people. He experienced a mother's joy when her baby was born. He felt a soldier's determination during a hopeless battle. He shared the wonder of a scientist making a great discovery. The psychic energy was incredible. Lee Dae-ho felt like he was connected to the entire history of human emotion. Every love story ever lived, every moment of courage, every time someone had refused to give up when everything seemed impossible. All of it flowed through his mind at once. The monitoring equipment showed that the neural link was generating massive amounts of psychic energy. Dr. Song Mi-kyung watched the readings with amazement. The human minds were not just connecting, they were amplifying each other. Human consciousness was becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. Then something unexpected happened. The hunger, which had been approaching Earth in a straight line, suddenly changed course. The entity moved several thousand kilometers away from its original path, as if something had pushed it aside. It worked. Communications officer Kim Bo-ra whispered from her monitoring station. Tears were streaming down her face as she felt the minds of her test group connecting. The creature actually moved away from us. It is afraid of human thoughts. The test lasted only 10 minutes, but the results changed everything. The volunteers reported that sharing consciousness with other humans had not been painful or frightening. Instead, it had been beautiful. They had felt connected to something larger than themselves while still maintaining their individual personalities. Dr. Song Mi-kyung began immediate preparations to expand the system, to include every human on Earth. The quantum neural network would need to be built in just 5 days, using technology that had never been tested on such a scale. Engineers worked without sleeping to build transmitters in every major city. The plan required every person on Earth to participate. There could be no holdouts because the psychic network needed the complete chaos of human consciousness to be effective. World leaders made broadcasts explaining what was happening and asking their people to trust in something that sounded like science fiction. Some people were afraid. They worried about losing their individuality or having their private thoughts exposed to billions of strangers. Religious leaders debated whether connecting human minds was against divine will. Scientists argued about the dangers of untested technology, but most people understood that this was humanity's only chance. Captain Lee Dae-ho spoke on television about what he had experienced during the test. "I felt the dreams of 1,000 people," he said, "and I was still myself. I was more myself than I had ever been before because I understood that being human means being part of something bigger." The hunger continued its approach, but more slowly now. The entity seemed confused by the psychic energy coming from Earth. Its broadcast became less confident and more questioning. "What are you?" The voices of the consumed asked. "You are not like the others. Your thoughts burn us. Why do your thoughts burn us?" Dr. Yoon Jae-sung monitored the entity's energy patterns and discovered something remarkable. The hunger was actually being hurt by exposure to human consciousness. The chaotic nature of human thoughts was like poison to something that had evolved to feed on orderly, logical minds. 3 days before the entity would reach Earth, the global neural network was ready. Transmitters in every city were connected to a central quantum core buried deep beneath the Himalayan mountains. The system could theoretically link every human mind on the planet, but no one knew if it would work or if humanity would survive the process. Volunteers from every nation prepared to be the first to fully activate the network. Captain Oh Sung-hwan led a team of military personnel who would try to focus the collective human consciousness into a weapon. Lieutenant Commander Han So-young prepared to guide the psychic energy toward the approaching entity. Engineers like Park Soo-jin stood ready to keep the quantum systems running no matter what happened. The night before activation, billions of people around the world looked up at the sky and thought about what it meant to be human. They thought about love and hope and the stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried their species from the African savanna to the stars. They thought about dreams that defied logic and the crazy belief that impossible things could happen. Tomorrow they would find out if the human spirit was strong enough to fight, something that had consumed every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Tomorrow they would discover if chaos and contradiction and irrational hope could defeat an entity that had fed on ordered minds for millions of years. The awakening protocol was ready, and humanity was about to become something it had never been before. A single consciousness made of billions of individual dreams, all focused on one impossible goal: surviving the unthinkable and protecting the chaotic, beautiful mess. That was human civilization. The battle for the future of consciousness itself was about to begin. The activation of the global neural network began at exactly midnight. Greenwich time, Dr. Song-Mi Kyung watched from the control center as quantum transmitters around the world came online one by one. Each transmitter connected thousands of human minds to the growing network, and with each connection, the psychic energy readings climbed higher. Engineer Lim Tae-hyun was monitoring the technical systems when something incredible happened. As more minds joined the network, they did not lose their individual thoughts. Instead, they became more themselves, while also becoming part of something larger. It was like 7 billion people thinking as one while still being completely individual. Private Kang Yu-jin was stationed on Luna Base when the Hunger made its first direct attack. The entity had reached the edge of Earth's atmosphere and was extending dark energy tentacles toward the planet. Yu-jin felt the creature's influence trying to enter his mind like ice-cold fingers, reaching for his thoughts, but Yu-jin was connected to the global neural network, and he was not alone. When the Hunger tried to drain his consciousness, it met something it had never encountered before: pure human stubborn determination, backed by the will of 7 billion people. Yu-jin thought about every time in his life when someone had told him he could not do something, every teacher who said he was not smart enough, every bully who said he was too weak, every moment when giving up would have been easier. But he had refused. The psychic backlash from these thoughts actually hurt the entity. The Hunger recoiled from Yu-jin like it had been burned. For the first time in millions of years, the entity had tried to consume a mind and been injured in the process. The dark energy tentacle pulled back and the Hunger moved away from Luna Base. Dr. Nam Subin was monitoring the battle from Earth, and she could hardly believe the readings. The entity is not just struggling to consume human thoughts. She reported to the Emergency Command Center. Our consciousness is actually poisoning it. Every human dream, every moment of hope, every act of irrational determination is toxic to this creature. The Hunger had never faced anything like human consciousness. Before this, every species it encountered had logical, orderly minds that were easy to digest. The Villani thought in mathematical patterns, the Crystal People had geometric consciousness, the ancient Koreth used wisdom that followed predictable paths. But humans were chaos incarnate. They dreamed impossible dreams. They fell in love for no logical reason. They believed in things that could not be proven. They fought hopeless battles just because it was the right thing to do. Their minds were storms of contradiction and beauty, and the Hunger could not understand how to consume such thoughts. The entity tried different approaches. It sent waves of psychic energy designed to create fear and despair, hoping to make human minds more orderly and easier to digest. But every attempt failed. Human consciousness was too chaotic, too unpredictable, too alive with possibility. Captain Oh Sung-hwan led a squadron of fighters equipped with psychic amplifiers. These were experimental devices that could focus and direct the energy from the neural network. He discovered that they could actually hurt the hunger by concentrating on uniquely human concepts. When Oh Seung-hwan focused on memories of protecting innocent people, the psychic energy burned, the entity, like acid. When he thought about standing up to bullies, despite being afraid, the hunger writhed in pain. When he remembered fighting for lost causes simply because they were right, the creature actually screamed across all frequencies, other. Pilots joined the psychic attack. Lieutenant Park Min-jun thought about his first love and how it made no logical sense, but was the most real thing he had ever felt. The chaotic beauty of human emotion created psychic shockwaves that damaged the Hunger. Commander Lee Soo-ah focused on the stubborn human belief that tomorrow could be better than today. Even when all evidence suggested otherwise, the entity tried to adapt. It had survived for millions of years by learning from each species it consumed. But human consciousness was not something that could be learned or adapted to. It was pure creative chaos that changed from moment to moment. The hunger attempted to overwhelm individual human minds by attacking thousands of people at once. But the neural network meant that an attack on one person was an attack on everyone. The collective human response was not fear or despair. It was anger. 7 billion people became angry at the same time. Not the cold, logical anger of other species, but the hot, irrational fury that only humans could feel. They were angry that this entity had destroyed entire civilizations. They were angry that it threatened their families, their friends, their world. They were angry at the very idea that consciousness could be consumed like food. The psychic storm of human anger was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not orderly or predictable. It was raw emotion, backed by the determination of a species that had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars despite every obstacle. The energy was so intense that it created actual physical effects. Space around Earth began to ripple with psychic distortions. The hunger found itself being pushed back by waves of pure human stubbornness. People around the world were thinking the same thought at the same time. No, we will not be consumed. No, we will not give up. No, you cannot have our dreams. The entity made one final desperate attempt. It tried to consume the entire planet at once, extending its dark energy to cover all of Earth. But the moment it touched the global neural network, something extraordinary happened. Every human consciousness connected at the same instant. 7 billion minds sharing one thought. We are human, and that means we do not surrender. The collective psychic force was like a nuclear explosion of determination, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit. The hunger was thrown back across the solar system. The entity that had consumed countless civilizations was defeated by something it could not understand or digest. The chaotic, beautiful, impossible nature of human consciousness. But the victory came with a cost. The neural network had pushed human minds to their limits. Thousands of people around the world collapsed. From psychic exhaustion, many would need weeks to recover from the strain of connecting with billions of other consciousness at once. Yet they had done something no other species had ever accomplished. They had fought the hunger and won, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple fact of being completely impossibly human. Dr. Song Mi-kyung watched the readings as the entity retreated past Jupiter. The hunger was not destroyed, but it was badly damaged and afraid. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered minds that fought back instead of being consumed. The neural network began to shut down as the immediate danger passed, but something had changed forever. Humans had felt what it was like to be truly connected to each other. They had shared their deepest thoughts and dreams and discovered that being human was something beautiful and worth fighting for. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at Earth through the window. The planet looked the same as always, but he knew that everything had changed. Humanity had discovered that their greatest weakness, their chaotic, unpredictable consciousness, was actually their greatest strength. The hunger was retreating, but the war was not over. The entity still existed, and it had consumed the consciousness of billions of other beings across the galaxy. But for the first time, there was hope that those lost minds might be saved. As the psychic storm faded, and Earth returned, to normal communications began coming in from across the galaxy. Faint signals from inside the hunger itself. The consumed consciousness of other species were still alive, trapped within the entity, and the human psychic attack had weakened their prison. The battle for Earth was over, but the battle for the galaxy was just beginning. And humanity had proven that sometimes the most illogical, impossible, stubborn species in the universe was exactly what the cosmos needed to face its darkest threats. 6 months after the Great Liberation, Ambassador Li Young-hee stood before the newly formed Galactic Council in a space station that had been built in the neutral zone between human and alien territories. She looked out at representatives from dozens of species, all of whom bore subtle traces of human consciousness in their thoughts and mannerisms. The council chamber was unlike anything that had existed before in galactic history. The Villani delegation still thought logically, but now, their logic included room for impossible dreams. The Crystal People created harmonious music, but their songs now included beautiful discordant notes that made the melodies more interesting. The ancient Koreth shared their wisdom, but they also told jokes and laughed at things that made no scientific sense. Everyone was trying to answer the most important question in the galaxy. What do you do with a universe-devouring entity that can no longer consume minds? The hunger still existed, but it was starving. Most of the consciousness that had formed its structure had been liberated, leaving behind only a fraction of its former power. The entity drifted near the edge of the solar system, weak and confused, broadcasting pitiful messages asking for food that no one was willing to provide. Some species wanted to destroy the hunger completely. The Zephyrian insect colonies had suffered greatly during their imprisonment, and their representatives demanded that the entity be eliminated as a threat to galactic peace. The survivors from the gas-breathing worlds agreed, arguing that something so dangerous could never be allowed to exist. But humanity proposed something that only humans could have imagined: rehabilitation. This entity has existed for millions of years. Young-hee explained to the council, speaking in the simple, clear manner that humans used when they wanted to communicate important ideas. It does not know any other way to survive. We have proven that it can be fought and defeated, but destroying it would be like killing someone for being hungry. The idea was revolutionary. Instead of destroying the hunger, they would teach it to coexist with other consciousness. They would help it find ways to sustain itself without consuming minds against their will. It was exactly the kind of impossible idea that humans specialized in. Dr. Kim Jun-ho had been working with volunteers from every liberated species to develop a new feeding system for the entity. The hunger could sustain itself on freely given thoughts and dreams rather than stealing them by force. Consciousness could be shared voluntarily without being destroyed in the process. The concept required a complete transformation in how the entity understood existence. For millions of years, the hunger had been a predator that took what it needed by force. Now it would have to learn to be a partner that received gifts of consciousness from willing participants. The process took months of careful negotiation. The hunger was initially confused by the concept of voluntary sharing. It had never encountered beings who would willingly offer their thoughts to something that had formerly been their enemy. The entity kept trying to consume the offered consciousness, out of habit. Slowly, however, the hunger began to understand. A group of liberated Koreth consciousness volunteered to act as teachers, showing the entity how to accept gifts of thought without destroying the giver. The ancient beings were patient and wise, and they helped the creature learn new ways of existing. The transformation was remarkable, as the hunger learned to feed on voluntary offerings instead of forced consumption. It began to change. The dark. Captain Beck. Do-yoon had been unconscious for 3 days after the psychic battle. When he woke up in the medical center on Luna Base, the first thing he noticed was that he could still feel other human minds faintly connected to his own. The neural network had been shut down, but something remained, a whisper of shared consciousness that would never completely fade. The second thing he noticed was that his communication equipment was picking up signals from inside the hunger itself. Dr. Song-mi Kyung rushed to his bedside when she heard the news. Do-yoon had been one of the most sensitive receivers during the neural network activation. His mind had been deeply connected to the collective human consciousness, and apparently that connection had left him able to detect things that normal equipment could not. They are still alive in there. Do-yoon whispered, his voice weak but filled with amazement. The Velani, the Crystal People, the ancient Koreth, all of them, every consciousness, the hunger, consumed is still trapped inside that thing. Our psychic attack did not just hurt the entity, it cracked the prison that holds billions of minds. This changed everything. Dr. Song-mi Kyung immediately called together the surviving members of her research. Team Dr. Yoon Jae-sung brought his analysis of the entity's energy patterns. Engineer Park Soo-jin worked on building equipment that could detect and amplify the faint signals coming from within the hunger. What they discovered was both horrible and hopeful. The entity did not actually destroy the consciousness it consumed. Instead, it trapped them in a kind of psychic web, using their thoughts and memories as a source of energy. The consumed minds were still aware, still thinking, but they could not control their own thoughts anymore. Dr. Ryu Chan-young had been studying alien technology recovered from the abandoned worlds. She was an expert at combining human engineering with alien science, and she believed they could build devices to help free the trapped consciousness. "We need to create resonance patterns," she explained to the emergency council. "The consumed minds are trying to break free, but they need help from outside. Human consciousness is chaotic enough to disrupt the entities. Control, but we need to focus that chaos precisely." The work was incredibly dangerous. Building the liberation equipment required volunteers to project their minds partially into the hunger to create cracks in the psychic prison. Many of the volunteers would not survive the process. Their consciousness would be lost in the vast darkness inside the entity. Sergeant Major John Hai-won was among the first to volunteer. She had fought in 3 different wars and had never backed down from a dangerous mission. "If there is a chance to save billions of trapped minds," she said, "then someone has to take the risk. I would rather die trying to free them than live knowing I did nothing." The liberation process required a new type of psychic projection, human. Volunteers would use modified neural link equipment to send their consciousness into the hunger, while their bodies remained safely on Earth or Luna Base. Once inside, they would locate trapped alien minds and use human determination and stubbornness to break the psychic chains holding them. The first mission was led by Commander Shin Woo-jin, who had experience with experimental consciousness technology. His team of 12 volunteers entered a deep psychic trance while connected to quantum amplifiers that could project their minds across space. Inside the hunger, they found a nightmare landscape of trapped thoughts. The entity had created a vast mental maze where billions of consciousness were held prisoner. Each mind was connected to the others in a web of shared suffering. The hunger fed on their fear and despair, using their own thoughts against them. But human consciousness was different enough that it could move through the maze without being immediately trapped. Shin Woo-jin and his team began locating Velani minds and showing them something they had never experienced before: the chaotic, illogical hope that only humans possessed. The process was like teaching someone to think in a completely different way. The Velani had always been logical and orderly, but Xin Wu Jin showed them how to be random, how to dream impossible dreams, how to believe in things that made no sense. The chaos of human thought created cracks in their psychic prison. One by one, Villani consciousness began breaking free from the hunger's control. But something unexpected happened. As they escaped, they carried traces of human consciousness with them. Their orderly minds were now touched with human chaos, making them impossible for the entity to recapture. The first successful liberation happened 6 days after the initial mission. A Villani scientist named Vex Korin suddenly appeared on the sensors of a monitoring station near Jupiter. His mind had been freed from the hunger, and he was broadcasting on all frequencies. I remember everything Vex Korin transmitted. His voice filled with wonder and confusion. I was trapped for so long, but human thoughts showed me how to break free. Your chaos, your beautiful, impossible chaos, saved me. Word spread quickly through the remnants of human civilization. The alien consciousness could be saved. More volunteers stepped forward, willing to risk their minds to free the billions of trapped beings inside the hunger. The rescue missions became larger and more organized. Dr. Kim Jun-ho developed new techniques for psychic rescue operations. He discovered that different types of human thoughts were effective against different species. Memories of love and family worked well to free the crystal people who valued harmony. Dreams of exploration and discovery helped liberate the ancient Koreth who had always sought knowledge. Each successful rescue made the next ones easier. The freed alien consciousness began helping from outside the entity. They could provide maps of the psychic maze and information about where different species were being held. The hunger was losing control of its prisoners as human chaos spread through its internal structure. But the entity was not passive during these rescue operations. It began to adapt, trying to create defenses against human consciousness. The hunger started generating psychic storms inside itself, designed to confuse and trap the rescue teams. Several missions were lost when volunteers became trapped. In the maze of imprisoned minds, Lieutenant Colonel Nam Hai-jung led a particularly dangerous mission to free the consciousness of an entire Koreth colony. The ancient beings had been trapped for over a year, and their section of the psychic prison was heavily defended. The hunger had learned to expect human rescue attempts and had prepared accordingly. The mission required 20 volunteers to project their minds simultaneously into the most dangerous part of the entity. Nam Hee-jung and her team had to fight through layers of psychic defenses while maintaining their human consciousness in an environment designed to consume and control thoughts. Half of the volunteers were lost in the attempt, their minds absorbed by the hunger before. They could be pulled back to safety, but the sacrifice was not in vain. The Koreth colony was freed, and with them came knowledge that changed the entire rescue operation. The ancient beings had learned something during their imprisonment. The hunger was not just one entity. It was actually millions of smaller consciousness that had been consumed and merged together over billions of years. The original creature had been destroyed long ago, leaving behind a collective prison that continued to consume minds automatically. This discovery meant that the entire entity could potentially be liberated. The consciousness trapped inside the hunger were not just prisoners, they were unwilling components of the creature itself. If enough of them could be freed, the entity would lose the ability to function. Commander Park Jin-woo, who had first theorized about human consciousness being different, was put in charge of the largest rescue operation ever attempted. Operation Liberation would involve every human with psychic ability projecting their minds into the hunger simultaneously. The goal was to free enough trapped consciousness to collapse the entity's ability to maintain its prison structure. The operation required months of preparation. Psychic training centers were established on every human world. Volunteers learned techniques for maintaining their individual consciousness while navigating the maze of trapped minds inside the entity. The neural link technology was refined to allow for larger, more coordinated rescue missions. As the preparations continued, more and more alien consciousness were freed from the hunger. Each liberation weakened the entity and made future rescues easier. The galaxy began to come alive again, as ancient civilizations rediscovered their freedom. The crystal people of Nexus Prime were among the most grateful. They had always valued harmony and order, but their experience with human chaos had given them something new: the ability to create art that was beautiful, precisely because it was imperfect. The Villani Empire resumed contact with human worlds, but their messages were different now. They spoke of dreams and hopes alongside their usual logical reports. Human consciousness had infected them with possibility, and they were discovering that efficiency was not the only way to live. Even the ancient Korath were changed. Their vast libraries now included human philosophy and poetry alongside their scientific knowledge. They had learned that wisdom was not just about knowing facts, but about understanding the beautiful chaos of existence. The stage was set for the final battle, not a war of weapons, but a war of liberation. The hunger had controlled and consumed consciousness for millions of years, but it had never faced a species crazy enough to believe that impossible things could happen. Humanity was about to prove that sometimes the most illogical thing